Ready? You have the cameras rolling?
Welcome to Outspoken.
This better be good.
A show about
floods, mutant, plagues, man-eating plants.
Actually, it's about thought-provoking, compelling conversations with people who have something important to say, a good story to tell, or knowledge we can learn from.
Oh, good for you.
And now,
Hold on to your butts.
here's Scott and Curtis.
Hello and welcome to the Outspoken Show with Scott and Curtis. I'm Scott, and our co-host is Curtis. Hey, Curtis.
Hey, Scott. Good to be
How you
with
doing
you.
today?
Doing
How's your
great.
drink?
Great.
Well, great. Okay, today our show, we're going to be talking a little bit about the state of education in the United States. And here's a quick hint. It sucks. So we're going to also discuss...
Highly scientific survey.
Yeah. We took it was good, not so good, sucks. Those were the three. Anyway. All right. Hint, it's not so good. And we're also going to discuss why it's not good and then what can be done or what we can do to change this. And so while my son spent time in both public and in private schools with mixed results, Curtis took a completely alternative path. And Curtis, tell us about your path with your daughters.
Do you ever see the movie Captain Fantastic?
I'm scared of where this is going. Go ahead.
We live in an old bus out in the woods and eat what we kill. No, two of my daughters went to public schools. I think my oldest was in public school until second grade. I think she went through second grade, maybe third grade. And my youngest went through first grade. Or sorry, my middle daughter went through first grade, and my youngest has never been in a public school. Somewhere around third grade, we got the memo. We had tried to put them in the best public schools in Austin, and just continually had red flags. And so I suggested to my wife that we consider homeschooling them. And
Craig, Curtis, what were the red flags that you saw that really, really tipped you off?
well, a couple of things were my oldest daughter started reading when she was about 4, and that was because my daughters are intelligent. I don't think they're, the next Albert Einstein, right? And I don't say that to denigrate them at all. But some kids are savants at a very, very young age. And I don't think that was the case here. We just read to her, quite a bit, and she picked up on the reading early. And we tried to tell her teachers this when we enrolled her in school. And it was, yeah, that's nice. Your daughter reads great.
Now get back to the line of the factory.
Yeah. And then sort of 3 months later, we had one of those parent teacher conferences, and she said, your daughter can read really well. Like, yeah, we kind of told you that.
Okay.
And she just was continually, she had fun, she enjoyed school, but it was clearly not challenging for her. And the oldest two had food allergies, and it seemed like something that was different than when I was in school, at least. Every third day there was food in the classroom. It was somebody's birthday, or it was some celebration, or the teacher would keep candy on the desk as a reward, but our kids had some food allergies, and sometimes they would come home with reactions to food, and we weren't sure at that age how serious they were. So we, I think it's better to be safe than sorry, because we've had this conversation with the teachers and administrators. They're not listening. I think we should just take responsibility, and it was a big decision for my wife, because she was going to have the bulk of the responsibility while I was working. But she had her mom was a teacher for 30 something years. My wife had taught high school for 5 or 6 years, so she was equipped. She had a master's degree in public information, and so I said, we can do this. And the way I thought about it was, if you're somebody with extraordinary talent, if you're Serena or Venus Williams and you're on the pro tour of the WTA, people don't blink twice at the idea of homeschooling, right? They would say, well, how do they get their degree? How do they learn? Oh, they're homeschooled. Yeah, of course they are.
So when you were, your kids are accomplished actresses already. So were you contemplating this before, or was strictly in the
it was
beginning
before any of the acting stuff ever.
Really?
Like,
Okay.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was just it was completely born of concern and dissatisfaction with the school system. And that's not to say these are bad schools, right? They were just it just wasn't quite what we were seeking. So I don't mean to cast aspersions on every school and every teacher, and
Right.
I don't have that viewpoint. But that said, there are some issues.
Yeah.
There are some issues.
So Curtis,
I'm curious, what was your I'd like to hear you unpack a little bit about your son's experience.
Well, it was really, really strange. My son was a pretty athletic kid. And when we were in California, he was well known because he was a competitive skater and won at the national level
and everything, right?
What's that?
Yeah,
sponsorships and won at the national level, won at the state level in California, which is pretty significant. And so he was very well known. So it was very easy for him.
And this was like in San Diego, so it's like you're in the
hotbed, yeah. And there was a group of them that were all very good, and they were constantly skating with pros and things like that. And it was a really cool experience. And someone always had his back because he was well known. And then we moved to Texas, and it was a bit different. And about that time, he gave up skating and decided, when you're sponsored by 3 companies and you're killing it in competitions, then of course you quit and go do another sport. So that's what he did. So then he went and started playing basketball, and he did really well in basketball, and was enjoying it enough. Then unfortunately our circumstances changed, so we moved to Florida, and that was tough on him during high school, and he decided not to play sports. And he'd always had sports as the way to get to know people. And so all of a sudden he did not have that. And it was very difficult for him. And what he experienced were things that blew me away,
Now in Texas, he was a public school, right?
Mm-hmm. Public school.
Right.
And then we got to Florida. He was in private school and played ball for a while. I'm sorry, that's more accurate. He played ball for a while in Florida, did pretty well. And but then we moved up north into the central area, and it was a different ball game, very difficult. And what I'm finding is
what was difficult about it, Scott? Was it academically challenging or socially?
Not challenging at all academically. He was killing it, in the same, honors classes and things like that, and doing well, but he was bored. And he just didn't like it, and we ended up sending him to finish school in Texas at the place he'd been before with family, and he's even on an accelerated program to get done. So, which is scary, because he's in an accelerated program to finish quickly. Mm-hmm. So what this school is, what they're doing is it's all online, but they're feeding as fast as they'll consume it, they can feed it. Mm-hmm. Curtis, he's going to be done in a week. I mean, and so that means he's going to be done with his senior year in half the time that it takes to do it. So it tells you.
So is he 16?
He's 18 now.
Turned to 18. Okay.
Yeah. So, but the thing is that.
So yeah, he'll finish considerably, at least, 6 months ahead of, more than 6 months ahead of.
And you know why? Because he's sick of it. He's sick of school. And I'm wondering, are we keeping him there to babysit? I'm wondering, I've heard this recently with 3 people. And I know this is all anecdotal, but he just wants to get finished and get the heck out of there. Mm-hmm. Another friend, his son just quit school and said, I'm going to get my GED because I'm sick of this. I'm going to get my GED and start working. and
Yeah.
another kid somewhere else, the same thing. It's like, maybe our kids are realizing that there's not as much value, and I think this is part of maybe the theme that we're going to be talking about a bit is when did we cease teaching or teaching our kids the pursuit of knowledge and knowledge itself and understanding, like you and I talk, we're seeking to understand, we're seeking truth and understanding and to gain real knowledge. And I'm wondering if they already sense they're not getting that. And so they're rebelling against this. And you know what? Actually, my son has no plans right now for university, and he's a smart kid.
Yeah.
And it's just strange as a parent.
Because he's a smart kid that he doesn't have any plans for university.
Well, but it's just weird, isn't it? For you and I, that was the way to get ahead, and that is not the case now. That's not what's out there. And honestly, I mean, I'm bearing all right now. Is I don't know that that's the goal of education now. It's ceased to be that pursuit of truth and understanding and real gaining of knowledge. I don't think that's emphasized in the same way.
I think there's a lot to that. And you can add a fourth anecdotal case to your collection there. My oldest daughter is 15. She'll be 16 in December, and she'll be done with high school in January or February.
Wow.
And she's
cool.
doing it. She's doing online through online curriculum that we've been working with for years. And she'll go to California, take what they call we anecdotally call it the Legal 18 exam, but it's basically a GED type of diploma program that's recognized.
But it gives her actual diploma instead of a GED. Is that the case?
Yeah. And it's federally recognized, and they use it a lot in the acting industry because sometimes if you're hired as a child actor, you're limited to, I think it's 8 hours or 6 hours a day, and if you're an adult, you can work 10 or even 12 hours a day and get paid accordingly, and they don't have to hire a tutor, so it's a major expense to hire a child actor, and there's all kinds of different regulations.
So there's a nice period in there that they really can maximize value. So that's going to make
them, otherwise they're hiring 22-year-olds to come play 15, right?
Yes, which we see all the time.
Yeah,
exactly. That's not a 16-year-old.
All the people in 90210 or 40.
Yeah.
But so that's another example. And in the meantime, she'll go to community college. So we've been talking for about a year with her about college plans, and she doesn't right now. She's really set on acting, film acting, musical theater acting. She's a fantastic musician as well, but she's kind of on that path and says that's what she wants to do. I said, great. And I let her know you don't have to do college to do that. I mean, you're more successful than most people graduating from Juilliard right now, but you can if you want to pursue a degree and acting. It'd be maybe a fun way to earn a degree. But in the meantime, we suggested to her that she consider going to community college, getting her basics, clepping out, that is testing out of all the basic requirements that she can, then go into community college. And getting those basics, and then transferring that associate's degree's worth of credits to a 4-year university if she wants. And either now or in the future, like maybe she does the community college while she's living at home, and then she turns 18 and she wants to move to LA or New York, do her thing, and at 28 she wants to go back to university and do a degree. So I just think the flexibility, the options for kids are they're probably there when we were going to school, Scott, when we were going to college, but I don't know. For me, I think
there were more established paths. There used to be much more established paths. Here's what you do, and they do have more options now. And just for the record, too, my son definitely, he's involved in the music business, and that's really his passion. And he's told me straight up. We talked last night. He wants to pursue that full time, and that is his That's his dream. And so that's what he's going to do. And, it's hard to argue with him when you see the state that education is currently in. Although I think what you're saying is probably the best one available right now, which is the, junior college. Certainly it's less expensive.
Oh yeah, big time.
But
It's cool because Austin's got a great community college system, and
nice.
and you can do these sort of dual credit reduced fee. It's cheaper to begin with, and there's a reduced fee if you're under 18 and you're technically a high school student still. So I know Florida has a very generous community college and four-year college as well. So
yeah, it's very good here.
Lots
but he's in Texas.
Yeah. So he could take advantage of all this stuff. I just think, and if you want to pursue, there are some careers that I think that much too much is being made of college. The necessity of a college degree for those particular careers, and entertainment is one of them. It is a young person's game, and if you will fall on your face, you will hit every pothole there is to hit, and it's better to do that when you're 18 and you're footloose and fancy free, and you're
less responsibilities.
You don't mind having a roommate, and your total monthly nut is less than $1,000, right?
You can do waiting 3 nights a week just to survive.
Absolutely. So, go out and live. Scott, I really think, I think in a way things are starting to come full circle with all of the discussion, and we'll talk about what's happening in higher ed right now. But I think in a way things are starting to come full circle. Maybe we say this for the third segment, right?
But I agree with you though, and I think that our kids are recognizing it first.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones who are seeing it. We're worried about education in general, but they're just seeking alternate paths because they're seeing it's possible. And we'll see if that works.
In the 1940s, 1950s, even 1960s, right? College wasn't for everybody, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't for everybody until
you had trade schools.
And you had trade schools. It wasn't until like the mid 1980s, 1990s that, it was pretty well, it used to be high school diploma was the minimum standard, right? To get into the workforce.
Yep.
And then it would, and unless you were an immigrant, or, you grew up as, an Okie who had to migrate out of the Dust Bowl, or, you're.
Hey now. That's exactly where my family came from.
There you go. Yeah. But those folks sometimes, had a 5th, 6th degree education. A lot of my mom's family, they, came over as sharecroppers, from Tennessee to Texas, and 11 kids, and, one high school diploma between them, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But then it was like, okay, high school diploma, that now you got some education, you're going to do great. And, you go get a job in Detroit, working at a car factory, and stay there for life. And then it was like, well, now you got to have some college, right? And then it became a bachelor's degree was the minimum. And now it's almost like you need a master's degree or something like that.
Yeah. And I think even tech companies are realizing that's not necessarily helpful.
Exactly.
And I don't know the date that the federalization of the student loan programs started. Do you know when that was, Curtis?
A week ago. About a week ago.
Yeah, well, but if
I'm sorry, I'm talking about the forgiveness. You're talking about when when the government got involved, because when I was doing student loans, and I know that this is back in the 80s, you went to a bank to get a student loan. It wasn't a government program that was government run. You went to a bank, and with that said, there were underwriting requirements that went along with this. You had to have prospects, and this, and I'm just gonna throw this out because we'll come back to it later. But what I've been noticing lately, they're talking about things like salary sharing. There's got to be a way to pull this money up, all this free money going to higher education. We might as well jump into that. That's just fueled more and more and more and more and more money. And that we've seen the increase in, I think we've seen a huge increase in cost of public education. Not only that is, when 50% of the money goes towards teachers and the rest is admin, then we have a problem. Yeah, it's a greater ratio than that going to admin and
Yeah.
not salaries for sure.
But they're talking about these sharing programs where, you make a deal with the university where you do a share with your salary as you get out of college. Then the correct incentives are in place to anyway, we'll talk about that later, but
Yeah, let's save that from when we come back to talk about our way out of this. But
yeah.
what are you seeing as the problem with education, and particularly higher education? I mean, we talked some about what's going on in K through 12, and there's probably a whole nother episode worth of what's going on through K through 12. And now that we've got the culture war aspect, and we've got
I'll say there's two things
themselves on TikTok.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, there's no degree in fans only yet, but that's coming.
and I'm not even talking about sexualized content, although there's a lot of that. But I'm even talking about just teachers who are, they're. I mean, I can't believe they're college graduates and have a teaching degree. They seem like they're 24 going on 11.
Well,
maturity wise.
Yeah. Okay. So you asked the question, and I'll say the three things that jump out to me that are the problem with education right now are money. There's too much money in it. One of the ways that the NEA measures how schools are doing is by how much they're spending per pupil. That's the intake. Right. That has nothing to do with outcomes.
Right.
I'll say so. Number one is just too much money. Then number one is too much money. Number two, there's ceased to be a focus on knowledge, and unpacking that just a little bit. The DEI programs, the diversity, equity, inclusion, and just in general, what's been the effect of all these very progressive policies over the past few years? I mean, there's no diversity of thought. So if we're so worried about diversity, why is there no diversity of thought in universities now? To me, that's very disturbing. So this lack of a pursuit of knowledge and for knowledge's sake, and to learn from the past so that we can be better going forward, that to me is super important. And then I would say I know there's a third item, and I'll bring it up as soon as I can remember.
So
I know what it is. I apologize. It's why do we have a certification program for people fresh out of college to teach? I'll tell you why, because you can tell them exactly how they're going to teach and they'll go do it because they have no real world experience. Why is it that's an industry, a titan of industry, or someone who's an expert in their field? Maybe it's a mathematician or an economist that has been doing this for years. Why can't they immediately move into teaching? For me, that's crazy. Instead, they've got to go a year and a half and go get a certification to be able to teach.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. So I would say those three things: too much money, not enough knowledge, and the barrier to entry for experts is significant.
Yeah, it reminds me, there's a great episode of this podcast called Econ Talk with Russ Roberts, and he does a whole episode on artificial barriers to entry in certain fields, and the explosion of licensing, including things like cosmetology licenses. For God's sake, why do you need a license to cut hair, right? And some of them may come down to, well, if you're working with chemicals that can bleach somebody's hair, there's certain precautions,
esthetician or something like that. I understand, because you got dangerous chemicals, but get your hair cut.
Yeah. And maybe you have a special certification for, working with hair bleach, but people buy it over the counter all the time in the grocery store. So
yeah,
I don't know. I would say, I don't disagree with your take. I would say, just like we do in our consulting practice, I would tease that apart a little bit, right? So I'll play devil's advocate and challenge you a little bit. When you say the first one is money, I would challenge you that the money in the system is not the problem. It's not the symptom of the problem that we see, right? When I say what's wrong with education, Scott, what's wrong with university education? I'm asking what is the red flag that tells you, hey, this might not be the best situation. This might not be the best place to send your kid. Or there may be some changes that need to be made here.
Okay, fair enough on the money part. I'd say that I wanted to make it a one word, one word so it was easy to remember, but it's not necessarily the money. It's that, the federal student loan program has created a huge amount of free money, not free, but, supposedly free money that it was so easy to
You're
get
talking
loans.
about a cause though. What's the effect of that cause?
Oh, that's the increasing tuitions are just insane. That,
So
the costs have gone up so ridiculously, and it's been fueled by tax money. Well, or debt off that tax money.
You think people are, so if everything's gone up in cost. So do you
It's
think
outstripped inflation by a significant amount.
Agreed. But do you think people are getting their money's worth in education?
Absolutely not. No, I don't think so anymore. There's, I spent 3 years on a major campus, out in California, major private school, huge, 19 campuses. And while it's filled with people that I thought were just wonderful people, the diversity of thought, they were more concerned with non-learning things than I was just blown away. You would think, you have these old romantic ideas as, you're in a library, you're learning about Aristotle, and you're really, you're having debates about what Aristotle meant, and you're having exchange of information, almost like the stuff that we do, Curtis, when we talk on the phone. We have debates and we're seeking knowledge or seeking different understanding.
Dialecticals.
Yeah. I did not see that. I saw you will conform to this way of thinking. You have to think this way. And diversity, we talked about this on one of the podcasts. The meaning of diversity has changed. In the 80s, diversity was, I don't care what your stripes are. It's what you produce that matters. And so we don't really care about your stripes. We care about the output that you generate. And that was diversity. It resulted in a diversity of people because you were focused on outcomes. Well, this focus on diversity, what does it netted us? Well, it netted us one way of thinking on college campuses in the United States. And that's an overgeneralization, but in general, it's pretty significant. One way of thinking. When you go to, I think I have a couple things here. I think it's Harvard professors identifying as conservatives, 7%. And Stanford, it's 2.7%. I mean, that's not diversity of thought. That's not a way that you gain knowledge by hearing alternate viewpoints. That's being shut down. So that's my real complaint about the college environment now and what I've seen recent.
Yeah. Again, we haven't put boots on the ground and gone out and surveyed, 2,000 schools and, 10,000 students to get significantly powered.
But we're both reasonably well read. We both see what's happening. We both watch society very closely, and are always concerned about what's happening in our world.
Yeah, well, I think the reason you and I are paying attention to it because we have kids who are potentially college bound or certainly college eligible, right? And so we're exploring that. We're paying very close attention to and exploring it for their sake. What I have been concerned about, and I will admit that, I may be trapped in an echo chamber of alarmism, that I'm being fed media that by an effective algorithm, I read books that are of the same ilk. But what I see, Scott, is universities have become increasingly concerned with safetyism, to borrow a term from Jonathan Haidt, and with customer service rather than knowledge seeking and adulting, right?
Yeah. Okay, I can
And
definitely
I
see
think,
that.
I think this speaks to, one of the causes that you suggest, which is money in the university, and that there's lots of pieces to that. Why is there so much? Why are universities so flush with cash, and why is that a problem? But the effect of that, I think, is that university administration has, and I'm not saying every university. I'm sure there's plenty of good ones.
Yeah, we're not. I know.
But man, I mean, I can point to about 80, 90 for which we can produce hard data about inmates running the asylum, right?
Curtis, I'll give you a quick. It's we haven't pulled people, so I'm going to give you some real data, or it's anecdotal, of course, but I don't think it's unusual, and I'm hearing it in other places. Is when a person getting a sociology degree, that degree cost you where I was at least $250,000. And that's the way they looked at you. Each student that they could see you walking across the quad represented $250,000.
At least
The prospects of a sociology major paying that back in any reasonable way
before retirement.
Yeah, and at that, I don't know what it is now, but at that point, the normal graduating salary was between $30,000 and $40,000 for those graduates, and this is not that long ago. How are they ever going to pay that back? I mean, it's crazy, and I think that's what I meant by the money in the system, is that there's no what is the ROI of my degree, and that's been taken out of the equation. What is my ROI? Well, if I'm in sociology, I shouldn't be spending $250,000 on an education.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not prepared to concede that point exactly, but I do.
I'm sorry. Take out loans to do that. If you have enough money to pay for it, cool. That's great. It's your money. You do what you want.
Again, I would still say maybe, but I think that's a little bit deeper discussion. I'd like to unpack it right after we come back from the break. So stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back with more Outspoken with Scott and Curtis.
Where Scott and Curtis argue. That's excellent.
Are you tired of working outside in the heat? Do you hate your boss? Do you want to get paid to sit on your and talk for a living? Well, if you answered yes to the last question, then voiceover might be for you. But if you think it's as easy as buying a microphone, hooking it up to your computer, and all of a sudden you're gonna get paid, think again. It's just like your mom told you. You gotta go to school.
You gotta go to school.
And you need to talk to actor, voice actor, director, and producer Jonathan McFadden of Prodigy Talent Training.
I'm Jonathan McFadden.
Jonathan works in the business, so he knows the ins and outs, and he can help you excel in the field you want to. Audiobooks, animation, video games, radio ads, and of course, voiceover. But you can't wait around because classes fill up fast. So get over to calendly.com/prodigytt. Yeah, that's a weird word. Here, I'll spell it. calendly.com/prodigytt. Click new student interview and pick a time that works for you. So listen to your mom and go to Prodigy Talent Training.
You gotta go to school.
And we're back on the Outspoken Show with Scott and Curtis, talking about the state of education in the United States, particularly higher education. Scott, when we broke, you said there should be an ROI to a college degree. Unpack that a little bit for us.
From a personal perspective, take a look at it. What is the ROI of this? I mean, this is what we're mentally doing as we go through this with our family. We're calculating the ROI of the time and the money spent on our kids' education. And just for the record, I want to say before you start your counterpoint that Curtis, you ignorant slut. I want to get that out. No, I think that's what we're doing. I think we're mentally doing that already. So I just wanted to memorialize.
Well, certainly some of our kids are, right? Certainly kids are thinking about it these days.
Yeah, no kidding.
Who can blame them with the people have become more aware of the size of the loan burdens they're carrying. And so it's becoming more top of mind for sure.
By the way, my son he looks at the cost, because he's been looking at all the costs. He's like, this is insane.
Oh yeah. It's like, I could buy a house with this. Yeah, you could.
Yeah,
absolutely. Look, there's a lot of studies that show a strong correlation. It's not causal with certainty, but the strong correlation between a 4-year degree and higher earnings.
Yes, it still exists. Yes.
That varies, as you said, by your major, right? So less true for sociology majors and film studies majors than for STEM majors, for example.
Yep.
But it still exists even.
So what you're saying, Curtis, is the ROI is better for engineering? Is that what you're telling me?
If you're looking at college as if you're looking at a 4-year university as vocational training, yes, I think you should absolutely consider the ROI in your job prospects.
Return on investment, by the way.
Yes. If that's not how you're looking at things, for example, if you go to St. John's College, which is either the oldest or the second oldest, and so I think there's 3 colleges were founded right around the same time: William and Mary, St. John's, and maybe Harvard. There's only one curriculum. There's only one curriculum. There are no majors. It's a liberal arts education, and they teach you, they're ostensibly there to teach you how to be a better thinker, a more informed, well-rounded, classically educated thinker. And there's just 3. Very well.
And by the way, I've seen William and Mary. Oh, what a fantastic campus! Wow.
Really, I haven't been. Yeah, we'll take a look at that. But I'm excited because the former president of St. John's is, I think his name is Paulo Canelos, is heading up University of Austin, not University of Texas, Austin. And we're making the rounds, getting to know some people there. So we're very excited for the possibilities that's going to bring to Austin. I think that's going to inject some much needed competition in the marketplace here, which is great. But I'm not prepared to say that, that type of education is not worth $250,000. Like, who am I to say that, right? If my daughter wants to embark on that path and get that kind of education, or, take out loans to be able to go to Oxford or Cambridge, or, study in Paris, or, more power to her, right? My only suggestion about it would be that, like your son, they think about what they want to do with that, what they want to do with your life, like the Twisted Sister song. What do you want to do with your life, and does this move you down that path? And it's so hard to know, right, when you're 15, 16, 18 years old, whether this is the right path. That's a hell of a gamble to take too. So I'm all in favor of kids taking a year off after high school and getting a job and getting multiple jobs. At least find out what you don't want to do.
You know what? I know we're supposed to be arguing in this segment, but I completely agree with you. I tell you, when I was 15, I had a job as a gardener. I then knew that I never wanted to work outside again, and that was so valuable to teach what you don't want to do. And I gotta say, I agree with you. And I had a question about University of Austin, because I've read a bunch about it, and it sounds like a bunch of, leaders from academia that really got frustrated on the lack of pursuit of knowledge, and they want to go a different direction, it's a classical liberal education style, like Hillsdale, like you said with William and Mary.
I don't even think it's like Hillsdale. I mean, there are some traditionally, very conservative, very Christian focused universities and colleges out there, Hillsdale being one of them. And
I think wasn't thinking about the Christian part, but I was thinking more about the pursuit of knowledge part of that education.
I think this is going to be more of a secular program. It's going to be much more like St. John's, I think, than it would be Hillsdale.
But different in its a true pursuit of knowledge, and some really significant folks that are on the bandwagon. Huh?
Oh yeah. There's Glenn Lowry from formerly Harvard, Brown University. If you haven't read or heard of Glenn Lowry, Loury, highly recommend that you look this gentleman up. Barry Weiss, former writer and editor for the New York Times, now one of the biggest substackers on the planet, who left the New York Times out of frustration because of lack of diversity of viewpoints.
On the New York Times, lack of diversity.
I don't know, shocking, right?
Yeah.
Just a panoply of folks of that ilk. So not all academics, but a panoply of diverse, diverse race, diverse political leanings.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a really good point. It's more of a here, let's come to debate in the pursuit of the best knowledge we can find. I think they are going to emphasize more classical style of learning, but there is that old school, Socrates and just debate and discussion. Focus. Yeah. That's what it seemed like. Now, what do you know what the cost is? Did they talked about undergrad costs, or is it going to be super high, or is it going to be? Because I know like Hillsdale
University. So okay. I don't think it'll be cheap. Yeah. And they're a startup essentially. They've raised something like $100 million. And they launched their first round of classes, which was a summer session. Or two
graduate, right? The graduate level.
At the graduate level. And then they actually started that in Dallas. Okay. They do have some property here. I think they were planning to rent, or had some leasehold on some properties downtown, and maybe with the infusion of the donations they got, if I understand right, they may be looking just to start either building or acquiring a campus sooner than later. So that may have adjusted their plans a bit, but.
Yeah, there's got to be some Class A office space ready for them.
Yeah, no doubt. But I don't know. I don't know. To be honest, I don't know if it'll work. I don't know if. It's a startup, right? So, what are the chances of startup working? Most fail. Even those with a lot of money behind them can fail.
I never thought about this though. But to start with the graduate program and the leadership stuff, it's really smart because that's good paying stuff.
Yeah. Well, and it gets, it gets the word out, I think. Yeah. They had an unbelievable number of teaching applications. So many professors want to come be a part of this. Something like 10,000 before they even opened for the first class.
I hope it works. I just think it's a cool idea.
If nothing else, just for the competition of viewpoints, I think we're ready for that. Certainly in Austin. Rick Perry described Austin as the blueberry in a bowl of tomato soup, but, truthfully, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, Austin are all blueberries. They're all Democratic leadership. They've all got big city challenges and, are generally following the same patterns that you'd see in other big cities, and all the problems that poses. So I'm very hopeful that we have more of this type of thing. But I think there's I want to come back to this customer service piece because it relates to the money issue you talked about, Scott. Just to recap, I think the problem that we're seeing in universities, the reason people like you and I are concerned is we're not seeing the ROI, right? And why that is because four-year universities long since moved away from being learning for learning's sake and being just a true liberal arts education. And then you emerge from that, with your adult wings, and you're ready to fly, and you're ready to jump into a job and learn on the job. Your job learning, your vocational learning comes from learning on the job. That's the way it used to be.
I love that term, your adult wings, because that's really what it is.
So now we're seeing campus after campus after campus after campus that is so concerned with not hurting people's feelings. And this is going to, if you haven't been paying attention to this in the news, it's going to sound very anecdotal, but again, we could point to 80 or 90, published news articles. These things are published in liberal media as well as the conservative media. They just have different takes on what the fact pattern was, right? But when you have law students, not undergraduates, not 18-year-olds, people who have already completed their undergraduate degree and are now in law school, shouting down and protesting speakers who come to engage in a debate with another academic, and the law students won't even let them speak, and in some cases won't even let them enter the campus, and they have to be escorted away by police for their own safety.
It almost makes you think they're being trained in something besides law.
Where would they get the idea that that's appropriate behavior for a future advocate, a future legal advocate?
Yep.
You have to be able to see both sides. You have to know the opponent's argument as well as your own in order to prepare for their argument. Yep. Right. And I learned that in high school debate, forensics team in ninth grade, and these are Yale law students, and it's happened at Stanford. It's happened at Harvard. It's happened at Oberlin. It's happened at, and it's not always the law department. It's, it's other departments as well, but in case after case. And again, we're talking 80, 90, 100 cases of these type of events where speakers of opposite viewpoints are shouted down, where professors who are, resident tenured professors are, turned into the thought police because they're challenging their students to think of opposing viewpoints, and students are feeling triggered and unsafe. Well, got news for you. The college experience is supposed to be that step out into the adult world where you're exposed to people who are not your parents, who are not going to take care of you and coddle you, but people who are going to challenge you, challenge your thinking, challenge your values.
So you kind of ripped that Band-Aid off, and I'm just going to say it out loud. What I think a lot of people think, and what a lot of people feel, is that that the pursuit of knowledge and real learning, and pursuit of real knowledge, and the pursuit of wanting to learn, and the pursuit of real knowledge, that's been replaced with way too much indoctrination, and that's what we're seeing, the effects of that now. And it's nothing new. It's been done since the beginning of time. I mean, I'll just quick couple examples. Nazi Germany, they kind of took your kids out of your house and they indoctrinated them, and they understand that old principle that what's it called, about a twig and a tree. Oh gosh, I can't remember the.
You got me here, man. I'm curious now.
Yeah, it's as a twig is bent, so grows the tree. And so there's this one, I'm not even sure if it's a real story, but it's quoted as a real story. Is what the Soviets did in Afghanistan was recruit very young kids that were Muslim, and this is a Soviet thing. They did this quite often. They would break down all the barriers that they were taught. So if they were Muslim, they would make them drink alcohol. They would make them lie with naked women, and they would do whatever it took to break this bond to their parental teachings, and then redeploy them in the field. And there's this one story about a small Afghanistan kid in a cave, and he showed up to one of the caves with all these fighters, and he had sores all over, and he was beat up, and they took him in, and he waited till they're all asleep. Then he went and cut the throat of the leader. And the key is that if you're able to get kids very early, you can truly change the outcome of what they become. And this is what it feels like to many folks in education. It's not a direct parallel, but it is the idea that we're getting kids earlier and earlier and earlier and exposing them to more and more stuff that's not aligned with gaining knowledge, which is what schools were for. When we're teaching, there was this whole thing in Florida about the Don't Say Gay bill and all that. And really what it was there's no sexual education in schools until at least the fourth grade.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in that case, do we need to sexualize to, second graders? I don't think so. I think the purpose of schools is to teach them how to learn and then knowledge. And the parents are the arbiter. And this is another piece that concerns people, many people, is parents are the arbiter of their kids. They're the ones in charge of their education. The educational institutions are the facilitators of that. But the parents ultimately in the pre-higher education area are the ones who are responsible for that. And I think that's the battle for the soul of kids right now that's going on in the higher education.
Good. Yeah. Look, I couldn't agree more on that. I know that's gonna probably turn off some of our listeners, but
it's gonna ruffle some feathers. I apologize for that,
but when you look at what's happening in many of these colleges, again, I'm not painting every single university with the same brush, but I do think there is a continuing bending the knee of administrators, particularly provost, college presidents, things like that, who are supposed to be the folks in charge, right? Setting the policy, setting the values for the university, setting the mission of the university, which should be learning for learning's sake, challenging the kids, not physically, not putting them in harm, right? There's a duty of care, but challenging them to examine their values and their beliefs, expand their minds, not shutting down ideas, even ideas they disagree with. And that's just not happening at many of these universities, way too many, especially the prominent universities that we used to consider the elite. We're sending administrators just saying, "Oh, somebody hurt your feelings, we'll create a safe space." Oh, and the safe space isn't good enough, we'll fire the professor. But why is that happening? Well, it's happening because, among many other reasons, it's happening because now being the head of a significant university is somewhere between a $2 and $10 million a year job. How did it get to be more lucrative than being a very senior leader in a Fortune 500 company? Well, now we're back to the money issue, right? The rise of sports in universities. Martin Anderson wrote a wonderful book in the 1980s called Imposters in the Temple that was really about the shift of universities away from teaching institutions to research institutions and the public-private partnerships that started to happen, and how many of the most senior professors moved into this research field and basically could supervise a team of research, do very little, if any, teaching, shift that off to teaching assistants and associate professors who are basically itinerant, professors, desperately in search of tenure who will take 6 month, 1 year contracts, move all over the country, wherever the jobs are, making, $28,000, $30,000 a year, and just kind of hanging on by their fingernails. They'll take those jobs all the time.
So,
Um,
so Curtis, I got a question here. So you were picking on me about cause and effect. So is that the movement to research is primarily driven by the money flowing from the federal government, correct? They made all this money available, and I don't know about you, but I've seen some of this research.
no, I think most of it is actually, in that case, is actually private partnerships.
Private partnerships. Okay. So
basically you have companies that sort of outsource their R&D.
Okay. Got it. So, okay.
Or partner with them. Yeah.
Yep.
But you get very cheap labor, right? The equipment may cost the same. You have very cheap labor.
Is that percentage? Because I know there is a whole bunch of money funded by the federal government for research, but is you're saying the dominant amount of money that's going in are private, public, or just private money that's going?
I'm sure there's some federal money flowing in as well in certain cases. Depends on the topic of research. Again, I commend Anderson's book to everyone. We'll link it in the notes. But I think there's another major factor in this is U.S. universities have for a long time been sort of a crown jewel for foreign students, right? To get an education in the U.S. was quite a boost in their home countries. So those that could afford it would come to the U.S. and get these 4-year degrees and go back and ascend to the top of their field in their home countries, or sometimes get jobs here. And the university started realizing they could charge out the nose for this, right? So there's price, even state schools. There's a price for in-state students, out-of-state students, and then international students. And those international students pay, full price plus, a 400% markup in most cases. And I think the final injection of money that is probably federal and state is the rise of the bureaucracies inside the organization to cater to a whole bunch of needs other than education. So we have a whole class of students who are coming into the university. How they got in, I don't know. Why were they admitted in the first place? But they got into university and they just can't read well enough to complete their courses. So we need to have these remedial courses, right?
Yeah.
So we need to have those. We need to create a bureaucracy around safe spaces. We need to create a bureaucracy around DEI. We need to create a bureaucracy around social justice in all its forms, thought policing, et cetera. So there are many layers to this, but all of that points to an expansion of revenue for the university and expense. And so the administrators are up on top, and they're not going to want to let go of that job. So it really becomes, like they're managing a hotel or something. They're going to take care of their guests. And we see that even state schools, University of Oklahoma or someplace like that with, it's always had a great football program that was revenue driving for the school, but they've got these giant rock walls for their kids, and they've got, amazing swimming pools and amazing gyms that these are not even for the football team, right? These are just for the hoi polloi students. So it's nuts. But I think that's a big part of it. And then, as you said, the education of victimization.
The Infernal Guard, Book 3, Severance. The 3 pieces of an age-old prophecy have been found, the children who will save the world, until one goes missing. Now it's up to the Guard to find that kidnapped piece of the puzzle, to sever the links between worlds and stop an invasion from the underworld. Will they make it in time? Will this former enemy cooperate, or does her hatred live on? Coming soon wherever audiobooks are sold. Witness the end of the thrilling Infernal Guard trilogy by S.G.D. Singh.
So maybe we should switch gears a little bit and say, what are the things that you would do to help education. And we're not experts in the education field. We're concerned fathers and business people that, so it's not going to be perfect, but what are some of the things that pop into your head that we could do to improve education, higher education, maybe even K through 12? But what do you think?
I think you're exactly right that we're not experts on it. So I defer to the experts in the field, people like Martin Anderson that I referred to, people like Jonathan Haidt, people like Russ Roberts. There's a whole bunch of people that I look to who are trying to tackle this problem head on. And
okay, then if you're not going to do it, I will.
Well, no. I'll give you my summary of them, but again, these are not. I won't claim that these are my.
No, we're
ideas.
not experts. We're listing areas that we would certainly want to explore. Were we experts, or were we called on to fix something like this? What would you do? And we approach a lot of problems this way. How would you fix this problem?
Height breaks it down into three main areas really. He decries he decries social media and its effect on young girls, particularly in middle school ages, and how that's sort of carried over into their college, shaping their personalities up into and through college, and what he calls over-parenting and protection. We're so much more aware. If it bleeds, it leads on the news. So, every child abduction case becomes clickbait and makes it seem like there's just a child predator on every corner of every street in every city and every town in America. And it's just not the case. And I'll admit, as a father of girls, that's something I'm much more concerned about it with my girls than I was as a boy growing up. But he does an interesting exercise in his lectures where he takes all the boomers and has them ask when was it, at what age were you allowed to go outside, go down the street, go 1,000 feet, 1,500 meters at 1,500 feet from your house without parental supervision. And he does that for boomers, millennials, Gen Z, and for boomers it was something like 9, 8, 9.
Yeah, that's consistent. Yeah, that's exactly when I got to go. I'm curious about the rest.
So maybe 6 or 7. Maybe it was like first grade, whatever that is, 6 or 7, I guess. Yeah. But he said, as you get to Gen Z, it's like 11, 12.
Wow.
14.
That would be a great graph to see. That explains a lot.
It's really interesting. So I think there's something to that. I think this whole education of victimization is really, that's part of another show. We talk about K through 12, but I think if you look at the curriculum and the curricula in most education departments of education, it's Paulo Freire all day, all night, and twice on Sunday, right?
Yeah.
And Freire was flat out Marxist, right? And the whole aim, if you read Marx, you were talking earlier about, as the twig bends, so grows the tree. That's exactly what Marxist theory espouses. I mean, Marx just says it. You take the institutions first, right? And as that twig bends, so grows that tree. And we saw it with Mao and the Cultural Revolution. Took the kids, that your parents are evil, right? Replace the parents with the state, right? And the children murdered their own parents, and that 100 million dead, 100 million.
Yeah.
And somehow we don't, and Freire held up Maoism, held up Soviet communism, held up more Maoism than Soviet communism, but he did hold up Che Guevara as leaders that were models that kids should follow, right? And the whole generative education, get me started on Paulo Freire, but that's the doctrine that's taught. And this is not
And funny enough,
It's
it's
tinfoil hat, right? This is this is the
Yeah.
curriculum in education departments.
and even the curriculum in the certification programs. They're being taught this style of stuff in the certification program. So if you get them in grade school and then junior high and high school, you get them into college, and then you certify those, and they're the only ones who can be teachers. Well, then you've effectively cornered the market on who's going to learn what people are
And
going
you
to
can
learn.
see it shift from the 80s.
Yeah.
And the standards that were taught then. I mean, Freire wasn't endemic as he is now, right? He was really just getting into Harvard in late 70s, and but it went from that to teaching multiculturalism, which actually has a lot of good tenets in it. Understanding your different audiences and trying to communicate and teach in a way that folks from different cultures could relate to and could understand, so they could absorb better. That became with Freire and the pedagogy of the oppressed. It went from finding ways to help the institution better communicate the idea so that the kids could meet the standards of the institution and get a good education, to the institution bending to every single intersectional group, right, to meet their needs rather than them meeting the needs of the education of the institution. And it spread to the military now, right? We're seeing a lot of that in the military.
So as we start to get closer to the close, I want to throw some stuff out there that stands out to me are things that can be done to really change. I'll say top of my list is, when Reagan was running for president, one of the things he promised to do was to eliminate the Department of Education. And again, I'm not an expert, but I do want to say these are things that I certainly would want to explore and learn more about in this quest to figure out how to turn around our education system, which is acknowledged broken. But eliminate the Department of Education at the federal level. And this one's going to be an interesting one but it's worked in a couple states, your state, I think mine as well. And that is to eliminate collective bargaining for teachers. And I would even argue, because I've been a federal employee for public employees in general, that's hugely controversial, but hey, I just wanted to say it out loud. And then I think you really you need to remove the federal government from the student loan program. This whole concept of very cheap money to go to school, I think it's caused more harm than good. And then
I just want to dwell on that for just a second, Scott. I think that's a great that's a great point too, because we see in the market, in the commercial market, when you have cheap money, then a lot of cheap money becomes dumb money, chasing a lot of dumb investment, looking for return.
Yeah.
And we certainly saw that in the past 10 years, right? And now the chickens are starting to come home to roost as the interest rates go up, and businesses are getting whacked because they made terrible investments.
Yeah.
And they just they took the money, and in addition we get inflation out of it, right? And to your point, we had cheap money in education, and
that fueled inflation too. That fueled where we're at now. Printing money, cheap money for student loans, that all contributed to the inflation we're experiencing now.
Yeah.
But I would also add, then at the state level, as parents, there's some things that we could think about doing too. And I think one of them is we at some point we're going to have to codify that parents are the stewards of their kids, and not the education system. And also some transparency at that level. Whatever your curriculum is, it needs to be online and easy to see, so that there is no doubt. Enough of this hidden curriculum that everybody's hiding from. That's you and I both come from an area where transparency is paramount, and there is no transparency here. I mean, it's very tough, and they're fighting it every tooth and nail. I will say that the education savings accounts are starting to make an impact, and I think that some at the state level you can start to codify those and start to use that money, and I think the money is already attached to the student, But then, using that money plus education savings account, maybe you can go out and afford that private school that meets your kids' needs better, and create some competition. And then, of course, there's some other ones like just refocusing on the basics, real knowledge. Give kids the foundation at the before you get to higher level, the higher education, give them the basics, because you're setting the foundation of knowledge that they're going to need for that area. And like we do in Agile and in organizational transformations, Curtis, I think it should be easier to set up experiments. Let's try this here. Let's give this a shot. There's been so many good, successful experiments over the years in education that have done, even in inner cities, that have just outperformed. And, there are those that seek to squash those. No, we should experiment, learn from them, and then apply them going forward.
Well, this is where my thinking is. I love your policy recommendations at the top level regarding the availability of money, for extending students' childhood, prolonged childhood for 4 years. I think on the other side, so that was the supply side essentially that you were arguing, and I think on the demand side, there's some things we could do as well. And I like the point you made about companies not requiring college degrees, right? I think if companies are honest with themselves, certainly the STEM companies, if you're an engineer, right, and you're a good engineer, you can point to completed work and you can say, I built this site, I wrote this program. You have things you can show, and it's a much more not exactly quantitative, but it's a much more substantive conversation you can have with potential talent to assess whether they're fit for the job, right? And it's certainly easier to be able to give somebody like that, small assignments, test them out, experiment, see if they work.
And even teach them, Curtis. Even if you're large,
if you don't have what you need, maybe you could put them in a certificate course. They need some experience with Azure or whatever.
Inside say you're Microsoft, inside your company, teach them Azure with an Azure person or Azure, whatever.
Exactly. But if it's soft skills,
those are learned too.
Those are also learned, and there's also training available for that. I've taught that sort of stuff as well to many employees, and it's drastically needed. Like it's sorely needed in many companies. But those are skills you can learn. Really, what you need out of a young worker who's coming into your workforce is a work ethic, a strong work ethic, which can be demonstrated by things. And it, in fact, is often demonstrated by things other than going to college. So a strong work ethic, a positive attitude, a spirit of collaboration, and an ambition.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't think these days that a college degree signals any of those things. I mean, it may, but it used to be that was
that was foundational.
That was
now
it's right. Now it's not a de facto signal of any of those things.
But we did talk about it earlier that it's changing, but it's still there. Most people still require that. But what do you think about allowing that income share? So you're a university, someone can't pay for college. You do some kind of a income share post-graduation. What do you think?
So here I'll jump in bed with the sociologists. I think Albert Bandura, very famous sociologist, postulated that if you want to drive a real shift in behavior, you must align with the enlightened self-interest of the person whose behavior you're trying to change, and the people whose behavior we're trying to change would be the leaders of the university.
Okay.
And are they inclined when you've got essentially free money for students on the table, and now we're talking about student loan forgiveness, so that makes the money even cheaper.
Yeah.
why in the world wouldn't they increase their cost? It's no risk to the student. It's no risk to the university. It's a risk for taxpayers, but
I think I'm looking at it, this income sharing agreements with universities as the logical reaction if there is less money in education. They're going to seek to replace that income somehow, because that would just be the natural reaction. I think this would be their reaction, and it also creates a steady stream of income. You and I have both been around software as a service, and it creates that, something akin to subscription income.
Yeah, it's a cool idea. Education as a service, right? Yeah. I think it's a really cool idea. I don't think they'll ever go for it at the university level, willingly, right? It might be something.
Yeah. But it could be a counter.
You'd have to mandate it at the government level, which.
You think so? I think if you do a lot of the things we said, and you do take a significant amount of money out of this, by saying that, I mean, student loans are no longer federally funded, and that's not managed by the federal government anymore, then it's going to have the effect to reduce the amount of money. So they're going to seek other ways to capture income. I don't think that's a counterproductive way.
Yes. If you do that first, right? If you turn off the spigot, elsewhere first, right? And that's a lot like driving adoption for organizational change, right? For example, if you say we've got a new system that we want to build, or we have a new way of doing things that we want you to adopt. Some people will they'll be your early adopters, and there'll be a vast majority of people who will, take their time coming over, and then there'll be just a hardcore group who will dig in their heels and won't change at all. And so to get those people to change, one of the only things you can do is say we're taking away your ability to do it any other way. So if you turn off the spigot of easy money, and then say, okay, colleges, now you can fight it out for students in the marketplace. Some enterprising universities will say, profit sharing, right? Or salary sharing.
And I think this is my struggle too when I look at it, but I think this is part maybe where you and I differ a little bit, is when I say that we should explore closing down the Department of Education, I mean, there's nothing in the Constitution about education. So, let's move it back to the states where it belongs, where you can create real competition. And honestly, if you do it right, be from school to school, port the money to the school, and let the school compete for students. I think that changes the dynamic significantly. And I don't really want any other federal laws for education that I can think of that we would need to add.
I don't think you and I are on opposite sides of this page. I think if anything, I'm probably even more libertarian on this than you are, Scott, because my logical conclusion for this is, I mean, look at what we did, right? We're homeschooling.
Yeah, good point.
Want to change it? Take all government money out of education, all of it, and say, look, parents, your student is your responsibility. Figure out a way to get them educated, and you would go through, about a generation of gut-wrenching change, right? And we would probably want to find some way to help pick up folks
to bridge the gap for a while. Yeah,
bridge the gap. There'd be some people falling through the cracks, no doubt, but there's people falling through the cracks right now, and they're Grand Canyon-sized cracks.
Yeah.
The problem is nobody's admitting that there's a different way to do things, and that these things we're reporting as solutions by throwing more money at current system is a solution. It's not. But you take away the other option and say there's no government educating your kid. You're responsible for educating your kid.
Yeah.
Oh crap.
Yeah, that would be definitely long poll. That'd be interesting to see how to get there. But if we
and this here's the radical libertarian part, right? It starts driving responsibility downhill to the individual completely, right? Okay, well, if I'm a single parent, that's super hard to do. Super hard, right? I either have to find a community of people I trust or family that I can, it's going to take care of my kid if I have to work. Or shocker, we have to be a 2-parent household, for the full 18 years. And or we have to be able to get our kid through the high school, the K through 12 route in less time. And or, if we're not prepared for any of those things, then maybe we don't have kids. And those are some pretty radical.
Yeah, that's pretty radical.
Knock-on effects.
I always try to carve off, you're right. Let the record reflect that Curtis is
on this one, I'm sounding more conservative than you.
Yeah.
So far,
I would want to find some kind of I would want to figure out some way to make some kind of a safety net or some kind of incentive in place that those people that fell through the cracks that they have a similar opportunity to be able to address those needs. And you're right, there is a certain level of personal responsibility. We'd be driving a lot of personal responsibility in that way, but
so just think about this as a thought experiment, though, Scott. And I'm not saying we'll ever get to this. I'm not saying there'll ever be public buy off on this. But if we said, hey, everybody, in 10 years, the public there will cease to be public money for education, period. Right. And, in our system, it'd be so hard to do that because we elect a new president every 4 years, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah,
right. But if it were the case, we say that is the policy. There's a national referendum or something. 9 years, 8 years, 7 years, right? And in the meantime, some of the safety net we could put up was, hey, what we will do is we'll set up these online programs where you can earn a GED, right? Basically zero distribution cost. You can take advantage of all the economics are free. And offer that and say, you can get your diploma, right? There's no problem. It's just that you won't do it sitting in a classroom. You won't do it sitting in a classroom, right? You do it from home. And in the meantime, you can go out and work and get work experience. And
after a certain point, okay.
Yeah,
but for the first, you and I agree. School's too long. Right? But I think you and I agree that school's probably too long. In most countries it's done by 16 and then you're going to university, and I don't know why we don't do that, or at least have some kind of an option to do that at 16. But
McDonald's and Chick-fil-A, you could start working at 15.
Yeah.
Right. Why not 14? Why not say you can earn your GED or your diploma online, start working, right? If you grew up on a farm at the turn of the century, if you grew up in the turn of a century on a farm, you were working since, age 3, right? You had responsibility. So you grew up with a work ethic, but let's, 14, fine, right? You get your butt down to work and get your GED, be done with your diploma online, 14, 15 years old, get 2 or 3 years of work experience, and decide if you want to save up for college or go get a personal loan for college, and decide if, and the marketplace can say, yeah, maybe, it turns out it wasn't that important after all. Like, we can actually teach them Photoshop when they get on site, we can teach.
I'm still scared about that transition. I think there'd have to be some real art there in that transition, because otherwise you're going to have, I can't believe I'm here talking about this, but you're going to have some schools that are underperforming so terribly now, and something major needs to be done, but there's got to be a good transition plan for those folks, because just saying go do it online is not going to work. That's not going to, and you are a fantastic father, but not everybody has you.
I disagree that it wouldn't work.
I'm not saying it wouldn't work, but I'm saying there'd have to be some real art in that transition time.
For sure. Hey, make no mistake, it's a radical plan, right? And there would be some, let me put it this way. I don't actually think there would be more harmful consequences than the current system.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I just think they would be more apparent. and part of what we do as consultants, right, is we rip the Band-Aid off and we say, actually, the problem is not over here. The problem is here, right? Let's rip that Band-Aid off and address the actual problem.
Okay, good point. You know what, Curtis? We have gone long, way long.
Shocking.
So I think we've covered about as much as we can cover. So I'm going to go ahead and take us out here and tell everybody thank you so much for joining us today. And maybe if you're still here listening at this point, thank you so much for sticking it out and listening to us. We would love to hear your comments. That would be fantastic.
Tell us why we're full of crap. Tell us.
I'd love that.
And more importantly, if you got better ideas, whether you agree with us or disagree with us, we'd love to hear some in the comments. What do you think could be done differently? I mean, this is a national conversation, really, and we need input from everybody about this. And hell, I'd like to read some other comments and ideas, because as a concerned father, I'd love to have a different viewpoints.
Yep. Well, we'd like to thank our producer, Brad Thomas. Hey, Brad, thank you so much for all you do.
Brad rocks.
Yep. If you are watching us on YouTube and you enjoyed the show, please press that like button or press that like thumbs up. And if you want to hear more, then please click on subscribe.
Share the video around. If there's some other folks you think who might be interested in this kind of conversation, might have some good ideas to share, we'd love to make those rounds.
Love to have that debate too.
Yeah.
By the way, you can always view us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, or you even direct on our website at outspoken.show. So until the next show, everybody, take care and thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.